channel. I'm Carla, and today I will show you how to use forms and shape, basic forms and shapes to create a human figure. Why I consider this is important and is something that you can get a lot of advantage from learning is because when we draw, we use actually really basic shapes, and by modifying them and stretching them and deforming them, we can give our characters certain attitude or appearance or something. And basically, the human shape is reduced to really easy and simple forms that are gonna help us to do this. So we're gonna start by learning which ones are those basic shapes, and then I will introduce you how I use these simple shapes, how I organize them in order to have a human figure. Well, there are some basic shapes that everybody can draw. This is not a really basic tutorial, it's a little bit more for when you already have some knowledge, but always if you're starting to draw, this is gonna be a help. And I hope I don't fall into too many complex and technical things, but that you can use in your day-to-day when drawing and so on. So we have some basic shapes like circles, okay, squares, and triangles. And then we have lines that are straight lines that they're gonna identify with an eye. Curves that they're going to identify with a C for obvious reasons, and then the double curve lines that they're going to identify as an S. And you say, how are you gonna do a human shape with this? Well, it's simple. For example, we're gonna say that we have head. And how is the head? If you see it from the side, it's like a circle and has the jawline, comes from here. I'm gonna give a tutorial soon explaining exactly how to set up this, but basically this is a head, and then you have a neck, let's say, and then you have a circle here, or ellipse. It's gonna be our rib cage, and then we have another line here. It's gonna represent the abdominal wall, and then here a square and some lines, curved lines like this, and maybe a triangle. Oh, this remind already a human shape, right? Well, this is why it's really easy and useful to learn really basic shapes and how to organize them in space, because they're gonna give us the security and the confidence at the time to draw, because we're gonna know where each thing gonna be. Sometimes we made a mistake to start already drawing the character without any base, and I don't know, we tried to draw it, but sometimes it doesn't have a shape, and then we don't know why it looks like that. And maybe it's this effect that we want to create, but maybe we want to make something more reliable, and that our character has some sense. Like, for example, if you're drawing that your eye, instead to be too close to each other, have some certain separation and so on, and that I don't know, your characters have a crane or doesn't look like out of place, and how you do the neck, and maybe from here goes the arm and so on. So it's really important to learn first this and how to balance it in a plane, rather than learning how to finish a drawing. Okay, so try to make some space here, and I'm gonna explain how to organize from a side view, for example, those lines and so on. Why I'm doing from a side view? Because if you do it from other perspective, then we have two perspectives, or put on perspective the rest of the shapes. Like a circle will be a sphere. Okay, I'm gonna have some wrapping lines. Wrapping lines are the lines that go around an object, giving the feeling of a volume. Okay, instead to be like this, they go around, wrapping the object. So let's say we have a sphere, then with a square, we're gonna have it on perspective. Gonna be a cube, and a triangle can be a cone or can be a pyramid. And so on. So why this is important? Again, because when you're shadowing, you want to know where the shadows go, where the lights goes. Like if the lights come from here, we're gonna know that we have to make darker there, and so on. So it is important at the end to know those basic shapes. So how we organize those basic shapes in order that they have more or less this appearance? Well, if we see the human body, we have something called the spine, and the spine is a line that goes from the head, goes through the back, lower back, and ends in what it is the pelvis. Okay, pelvis looks a bit like that. So this line, normally some people who, let's say, at the beginning of drawing humans and so on, we draw a bit like this. So if we do a person, it sometimes looks a bit like this, and we don't understand why. What is wrong with this person when he's walking? Yeah? And the person is like, oh no, I am stiff. So that's why the spine is important, because it's what keeps everything on balance and gives some movement to your character. So spine is, let's imagine that it's a symmetrical line. This one that goes here from the side view, another one that goes there, this and this, and voila, then we have a spine that maybe if we do a continuous line, gonna look a bit like this. I consider personally that it's more important that at the beginning of the drawing we don't care about too much about the proportions. Why? Because if you over measure everything at the beginning, you are resting on spontaneity at the time of drawing. So what you get is something, okay, maybe super correct by measurement, but you don't have anything because you spend a lot of time trying to correct something that maybe changed in the future. So just try to organize the shapes on the spine, and then we will care about the proportions in a more advanced step of the drawing. This is what we call a gesture drawing, because it is a kind of drawing that frees a certain action of our character or an attitude, and it gives us the pose and the attitude. Okay, it's also gonna help in our story to say something in our story and give a weight and a balance to our character, and we're gonna be working with anatomy in order to have a real character that can be outside of our imagination, can be a monster but still have some sense, can be an animal but still feels that is reliable to a real one. So we have, as I say, the spine, that if we will make it like a real spine, let's say, is really I'm trying to do it a bit abstract, but you can see that the spine goes with all these wrapping lines all around, and its perspective also. So if we are seeing the character from down, it will look more like this. If we are seeing the character from close, from the bottom. So everything in our drawing gonna have some perspective. But yeah, we go again with the line that goes from the head until this part. Okay, so establish that. You can choose how to do it exactly, because this is my way to do it. I work better with straight lines rather than with curves. So I set up that, and then I say, okay, here you can also do this circle at the beginning. I prefer to do at the beginning. So I set up the circle like here. So then we draw a triangle that goes from this point until here. Then we draw again an ellipse. Ellipse is like if you take a circle and squish it from here, and then the circle looks like this. So now this is our rib cage that is a bit more squishy on one side, so it looks a bit like this. And then the abdominals, maybe I put too much this here. The abdominals and a square here, or a circle as you prefer. I prefer a circle, a square, because I can perspective it. And then the legs. The legs gonna be just two curves. But let's say if we have a line from here until there, the curves goes one out and the other one in. And then we imagine that here is the ground, and we do a triangle, maybe more like this. And then imagine that has arms that we can just do with one curve in this state of the drawing. So what do we have here exactly? What we have done with a circle and a square and a triangle? We have done a human figure, and this is like if we have 8 parts. Okay, we have the head, this is the rib cage, that is the hips or pelvis, the legs for 2, the arms for 2, so and the spine, the most important part. I almost forget. This is, yeah. So these 8 parts is the basic shapes and forms from our body, and this gonna help us to find an act of balancing, to find a story, and to give a story to our character, to give a sense of reality and make it real, as I mentioned before. And how we do it, if it's a front, let's say that we have a front part. So if we have the circle, square, the triangle, we draw a line here, and we say, okay, the head, if we see it from the front, it's not actually a circle. We don't have, normally our faces don't look rounded. It's like, something is wrong there. So our cranium, our skull, is a square, it's a rectangle. Then we have the neck, there's another little square. Then we have the rib cage, that can be a rectangle or can be something like this, an egg shape. Prefer to draw it in an A shape when I draw it from the front, but can be a bit less confusing. I do also a triangle and a square to mark where the shoulders gonna go afterwards. So it's gonna be the arms with elbows. The spine, if we see it from the front, it is a line. Of course, this line gonna have shapes because not all our vertebrae are the same size, but that's something really technical. You don't need to really go over it. And then we have here the abdominal part, the hips of the pelvis. This is more or less the hips. Then it's the legs. Our legs are quite funny to draw because we normally think in legs like this, but actually legs go in and then out. Our bones do this, and it's really funny to see, because when I learned this I was of course but at the beginning can be really confusing how to draw legs and so on. I'm gonna go over it in another tutorial much more better explain it, but yeah, as you can see, we draw 2 lines here. Again, no worries about the proportions, we're gonna go over it in another state of our drawing. Just draw line, curve, another curve, but maybe this curve is a little bit thicker. Then our ankles, like this, and a triangle. Another triangle. Look, are really basic shapes. Almost everybody can draw this. I think is not something that requires a lot of complexity, but you are already saying things you already can do with this. Take it and make it like landing in one side, leading in one side. Excuse my English, I'm not English speaker, so it is quite tricky sometimes. Let's say that hips also a bit rounded. We can see already an act of balancing in our drawing, just using really basic shapes. So if we want to do someone like this, I don't know, this person maybe is drunk because went with friends because the quarantines were over and got drunk and super wasted. So draw is dropping one arm with maybe a bottle in her hand or his hand, and is walking, trying to arrive home. So this is already telling us some story, and it's again a rectangle, a square, another rectangle, a circle, and a square, a rectangle, a line, a curved line, and a triangle. How is this possible, right? Well, that's why it's important to learn this. Already we can imagine our character and give a sense of movement and existence. So when we see it from the side, how it will look? Well, you see, if we have from a three-quarter perspective, for example, if we have head, or we're gonna go over the head in the future. The first thing always the spine after the head. We're gonna perspective this ellipse. Remember, if we see it from the side, it looks like this. If we turn it a little bit, we do a wrapping line, and that will help us to perspective whatever we are doing, because we imagine that this has a volume. Just try it and try and see, and when it has some sense, and maybe ask, do you see this perspective? And people will tell you yeah or no, I feel something weird about it. Well, that's gonna tell us a lot. But we can make just also a square like this, abdominals, the hips, those legs. So it's a bit out of balance. That's important to see it. I consider this is much more important to take care about rather than proportions at the beginning, because when we are drawing, one of the important things that we have to do is to keep a balance in our drawing so the drawing doesn't fall. How we do that? Well, we reach the middle point and we try to find where is the balance. This character now is a bit more imbalanced. Before it was more like this, and you can see that the most heavy part of our body is this in this drawing, and if there is nothing behind it to hold it, the drawing just gonna fall and gonna end up with like this. And if it's not this our intention, when we are drawing, gonna look a bit strange. hope I don't fall. What? So let's take, for example, real drawing. Okay, I have here some examples of that I previously do, but we're gonna go over it again. So we have this character. First thing that I will do is try to find a line, a curved line that goes around this character to tell me how is this falling, and to identify the place where I have to put the spine, because that's gonna give me a guidance. It's gonna give me where I have to put the rib cage and the hips and whatever else I want to add to my drawing. So we have here, I would say that it's a line like this and kind of S line, and then another one here. Okay, so there is a movement going. You can see it is like the energy flowing around the character. Something important I didn't mention before is when you're drawing and you're using curves, you have to try that not everything in your drawing looks symmetrical. Because why? Because it's boring, and because when someone is seeing, gonna stop in the symmetry. You have to try, when you draw, that you create a flow through it, so people can read the information, because our eyes cannot read too much information and they get lost, and when they have to make too much effort, they just get lazy and they say, oh, this is boring. That's why when we see a really complicated character with too many details everywhere, maybe one or two people gonna stop to look at it, but in general people will pass and ignore it. So what do we do is to focus more in some parts of the drawing and to create asymmetric shapes that gonna grab the attention of our eyes and gonna allow our eyes to read the image, and that's gonna make your drawings much more interesting. So how we do that? By, for example, using curved lines that doesn't match with each other, that create a certain asymmetry, and also using more than few lines to create a rhythm in the drawing. So I know that here it comes fast, but here it comes slow, and here it's like really strong, and then it goes away. So I hope that this this is something that has to be done. I hope that helps you to understand. So we're gonna continue with this character. So we see those lines. We're gonna make a new layer, and we're gonna create this with a nice color red. See, it goes like this and like this. Maybe arm. So we have already the energy that she is creating, right? So now we have to say, okay, here gonna be the head. Her head is more or less frontal, not entirely. Then her spine is like, comes here. So I'm gonna draw her spine there. Then it is a bit like this. Her hips are here. Her rib cage. Hips, her legs, here is where all the weight is. You can see it because of this is what happened on the hips, and then goes here. So her abdominals are a bit contracted here are stretched, and shoulders, arms there. And she's holding the sword in a really weird place. Never saw anyone fighting like that, but yeah, I guess it's a way to make it more interesting for the photography or the drawing. And she's lying down with her head, so something is gonna perspective. So as you can see, more or less, we have how she is standing, and I will propose everybody to do something like this, like take a picture at home and in a paper or something, and start drawing what will be the skeleton of the drawing with these basic shapes, because then once we have those basic shapes, as you can see, I explain here what is the balance. The balance is like how it comes from here until the ground, and we check that there is a line and still in balance. If this line will be here, which means that the triangle will be like this, our body weight gonna be here, and that's closer to the ground than this. So see like that. Here you can see it was a gesture drawing. I put more emphasis in the hips because it gives me a more realistic vision of how her body is. So basically, doing those shapes, we can create a human body, and then we can keep on working on it, adding some details and then correcting the proportions. How do I correct proportions? How do I measure if my proportions were right? Well, I take the head and I start duplicating it and putting one under the other, and I check, okay, this was too long, or maybe the legs were too long in comparison with the body. Then I select the legs and I make them shorter, or I erase that part and I do it again. But what is interesting and important in the drawing is that you keep it simple, that you don't start over measuring, so it doesn't get really stiff. But it will come, and if it has some sense for you, it will have sense for the drawing. So it doesn't have always to be super perfect to be correct. So in a general view, again, we have the basic shapes, the circle, the square, and the triangle, and how we organize them in the space and give them balance is what's gonna give our story and composition in our character. We have the spine that has this kind of shapes. If we see it from the front, if we see it from the back, and it's like this. And we have the lines, the C lines, the curved lines. The S is like the spinal line, and the I that is the straight lines. And every body or every composition has 8 heads in general. And the important thing is to try to keep our drawings in a balance. How we see that balance? By making some lines that refer to it. Balance. Making a triangle and seeing that this line has in general a square angle. Okay, at least one. Which one I give you? So basically, this is my advice for trying to find a place for the basic shapes and organizing your drawing at the moment of starting a new session of drawing. Remember to try to draw different shapes of over here you can see how our eye goes first through here, then stops here, then goes here. That gives already a sense of movement on it. We can see also if we have other drawing that we can draw here, like for example that one. Then I'm gonna take a line that goes through here and goes there, so I'm gonna draw a line, then identify where the spine is, where the head is, and if it's perspective or not, and perspective or not, the rib cage, the hips, how are the hips on perspective. This is important because it's also part of what gives us some clues. And then the legs. So like that at home in your notebook or something, start drawing the different shapes, and you will be able to go with more confidence the next time that you are trying to draw something.